Hello everybody, Survivor Driver here, riding right beside you for yet another daily commute. And today's music is by a Spanish band called Gambardella, and the piece is called Malparaiso. It's a jazz, rock, psychedelic type fusion. It's really good stuff, just discovered them. It's all instrumental, so be listening for that. It's really fun music. Some really interesting stuff coming out of Europe, quite impressive. So I guess, you know, one of the big stories today, again, I call this Relentless news for a reason, because it is relentless. So many things that are tumultuous happening these days. But I guess you could say one of the big stories is Jussie Smollett, I think, is about to become small-ish. Let me just read a headline here from Fox. Jussie Smollett indicted on 16 felony counts following Chicago attack allegations. Empire actor Jussie Smollett was indicted Friday on 16 felony counts following his Chicago attack allegations. Following the news, Chief Communications Officer of the Chicago Police Department tweeted, as Superintendent Johnson stated, allegations against Mr. Smollet are shameful, and if proven, they are an affront to the people of Chicago who embraced him as a neighbor and respected him as a role model. We stand behind the work of detectives and refer any comment on indictment to prosecutors. So it looks like Smollet, as I said, is just going to become smallish and fade into the distance with time as just yet another criminal. I mean, you know, 16 felony indictments is no joke, and there's no doubt in my mind he's going to be found guilty on some of them. You know, go through the due process and all of that, of course, and go through what will probably be just a dog and pony gong show trial. But I think he's going to fade into the past and become smallish as just another criminal. Okay, the next story is about Tommy Robinson, somebody that I do not think will fade away into the past being seen as a criminal. Now, the British government is going to charge him with contempt of court again, and he was already charged with contempt of court once, and that case was thrown out of court. And so it looks like they're going to try and wear down Robinson through attrition. And here's some comments that Dr. Steve Turley had on this particular matter.
All right, the British government has announced it'll be bringing fresh charges against Tommy Robinson in an attempt to send him back to jail, which, frankly, they're just the old charges rehashed because the powers that be don't believe he served enough time in jail over the last summer. The Attorney General there, Geoffrey Cox, has decided that it is supposedly in the public's interest to prosecute Tommy over the allegations that he committed contempt of court by filming a Facebook live stream of a number of Muslim defendants entering a law court. If I recall, right, weren't they already convicted? I think they were convicted being part of a child grooming rape gang. I mean, just lovely stuff. And Tommy was bringing incidents like these to the forefront of our news information since the secular, corporatist, globalist media has no interest in doing so. It's so interesting. You know, I was listening to a scholar the other day on YouTube who was pointing out in an interview that when you have either your, you know, either one of your major political parties or your mainstream media just willfully ignoring issues that the populace cares deeply about, then eventually you're going to have what he called political bootleggers, right? This is what we had during the Prohibition here in the United States. The vast majority of the United States population wanted to drink. And if the dominant institutions ignore, reject that want, then the population turns to bootleggers who are more than willing to supply them with their wants and their needs. And I certainly don't mean to be derogatory in any way. I'm a huge supporter of Tommy, but this is in many respects kind of like the role that Tommy is playing in the media. He brings to light the stories that many of us are concerned about, but the mainstream corporatist, globalist, left-wing media intentionally ignores or suppresses in order to maintain their cultural Marxist meta-narrative.
So Dr. Steve Turley lays that out very nicely, I think. I really like this gentleman's work. Let's have a quick look at something called the English Revolution and what took place. The period of the Revolution was important in the development of ideas about liberty, as the temporary collapse of censorship in the early 1640s saw an outpouring of political pamphlets in which groups like the Levelers advocated a theory of liberty based upon individual rights, especially the right of self-ownership and private property. So that's pretty astounding. I mean, when you talk about censorship taking place now, and it's taking place on behalf of the media in Britain, I don't know. It seems to me like this might potentially be a precursor to yet another English Revolution, because, again, with the British government trying to wear down advocates of the freedom of basically speech by people like Tommy Robinson, I don't think the British people are going to take it. Okay, so let's have a listen to this piece of music called Malparaiso from a Spanish group called Gambardella. Okay, now, no look at the news here in Canada would be complete without having a look at what's happening with old Dustbin Trudeau. And that's what I'm calling him from here on in, is Dustbin Trudeau, because that's where this guy is heading. You know, this guy is supposed to be the feminazi in chief, and I'm going to show here how 4 pretty substantial ladies in Canadian political life have gotten as far away from this guy as possible. Now, of course, we had a number of weeks ago, Jody Wilson-Raybould resigned. She was fired as Attorney General and put in charge of Veteran Affairs, in which she promptly resigned from. Now, of course, she gave testimony regarding being pressured by the Prime Minister's office to engage in interference in the SNC-Lavalin scandal. They're calling it an affair. It's a scandal. This guy I think he thinks he can control women, is what I think is going on with this guy. Because don't forget, there was an allegation in the past by a woman that he groped her. He said he didn't grope her. His buddy from high school came out and made an announcement that, well, it kind of was groping, but it can be seen one way by the groper and another way by the gropee. And then Trudeau had to finally come out and say, yeah, I groped her, but I don't believe that I did anything wrong. Well, you know, that's kind of like the same old story of where a woman says no and the guy says, oh yeah, your mouth says no, but your eyes say yes. So now apparently Jody Wilson-Raybould has said that she's prepared to give further testimony. She added that she would of course make herself available to give additional testimony, stating that her previous testimony was not a complete account, but only a detailed summary. So yikes, Dustbin, yikes, yikes, yikes. It really is starting to look like this guy is heading for the dustbin. But let's have a look at somebody else that resigned right after Jody Wilson-Raybould resigned. Name breaking, another Liberal MP resigns from cabinet over SNC scandal. Jane Philpott resigned as well. Unfortunately, the evidence of efforts by politicians and or officials to pressure the former Attorney General to intervene in criminal case involving SNC-Lavalin, and the evidence as to the content of those efforts have raised serious concerns for me. So this is not looking too good for Dustbin Trudeau. But let's take a look at another lady, and of course this is the guy that's supposed to be the feminazi in chief here, Mr. Dustbin Trudeau. He's supposed to be all inclusive, Mr. Sticky Sweet. Here's another lady, Liberal MP, Selina Caesar-Chavins, I think is how you pronounce her last name. I hope I have that right, no offense intended. She says she was met with hostility and anger in private Dustbin Trudeau talks. This is not looking too good for Dustbin either. Said she had told him that she hoped he would one day understand the impact that political life has had on her family. She said threats to her safety have been made against her in the past. So she's talking about that she had informed Dustbin Trudeau that she was going to resign. He wasn't happy about it. But she continues, quote, he was yelling that I didn't appreciate him, that he'd given me so much. She said that she yelled back at him, and Mr. Trudeau eventually apologized. She said she agreed to his request the next day to hold off on making her announcement until early March. So what had happened here is that Ms. Chavins told Trudeau that she was going to resign, but he didn't want her to announce it and wanted her to hold off because he didn't want it to be seen associated with the SNC-Lavalin affair, which doesn't make any sense because he's saying there is no problem with the SN-Lavalin scandal because he was just there saving all Canadians all kinds of jobs. A week later, after a caucus meeting, Ms. Caesar-Chavin said she was approached by Mr. Trudeau to talk about their previous interaction. I went to him, quote, she said, I went to him, I said, look, I know our last conversation wasn't the greatest, but, and at that point I stopped talking because I realized he was angry, she said. Again, I was met with hostility, this stare down, then him stomping out of the room without a word. So this guy does not sound like a world leader, and there's not a lot of world leaders that see this guy as a world leader. You can't forget, though, going back into the past here, sometime into the past, September 18th, 2018, Ontario p.m. leaves Liberal caucus, crosses the floor to join Conservatives. So now this was a Liberal MP that was not happy with what was going on in the Liberal caucus and left and crossed the floor and joined the Conservatives. I think people have forgotten about this. So this is 4 women we're talking about here. So God only knows what's happening in the background that we're unaware of. But anyway, this lady, Leona Aileslev, said that their government needs to be challenged openly and publicly, and she didn't feel it was possible for her to do that while remaining in the Liberal caucus. She said her attempts to raise concerns with the government under Prime Minister Dustbin Trudeau were met with silence. Well, you're lucky, Miss Aileslev, that he didn't stomp his feet and walk out of the room. So I think Dustbin Trudeau is done, and it couldn't happen to a better guy. You know, good riddance. Sweep him up, throw him in the rubbish heap. Anyway, that's it for Survivor Driver, folks. Thanks for joining me once again. Don't forget to hit that like button on my behalf, and we'll see you next time around.